This conference will now be recorded.
I'll say that again. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Carmen Bishop, and also with me is Casey Judge, and we're both in zoning administration. This is our fourth lunch and learn in the series following adoption of the new zoning ordinance as part of the ZMOD project. And our previous lunch and learns, along with some other documents and presentations, are available on our ZMOD documents and presentations page, and we can put a link to that in the chat box. This one will be posted there as well. So our previous lunch and learns have included accessory living units and home-based businesses. So we don't plan to discuss those topics today. Today we plan to focus on accessory structures and some other uses that are allowed in residential districts. And we do have a few slides we'd like to get through, and then there will be time at the end for questions. But if you have questions along the way, please feel free to pop those into the chat box as we go. So just one background slide in case we have anyone kind of new to the ZMOD project. This was over 3 years of work and over 100 public meetings that resulted in the board adoption of a new zoning ordinance on March 23rd. And this new zoning ordinance, it did go into effect on July 1st. And so this new zoning ordinance, the intention is for it to be more user-friendly and intuitive. It includes modern uses and permissions. We reduced the previous 1978 dated ordinance from 26 articles and 6 appendices and over 1,200 pages down to 9 articles and just about half that in the page count. So part of this was achieved through what you see here on the screen, the use of more tables and graphics, which are more accessible to the reader. On the left, you see a snip of the use table that's found in Article 4. On the right, a snip of a lot and building standards table that's found in Article 2 for each of the districts. And also we used what we call our plain English effort to make it more understandable. And now it's been placed onto an online platform called Encode Plus. I'm going to say that the more I use it, the more I like it. It's got a lot of neat bells and whistles. It has some hover over definitions that will pop up, and then you can click out to higher resolution photos and so forth. So anyway, I think you'll like it as well. But with that background, we'd like to move on today and focus on some accessory structures and uses. So for freestanding, what we call in zoning ordinance parlance, freestanding accessory structures, we did consolidate previously what were treated separately, what we would call a shed or an accessory storage structure, and all other types of freestanding accessory structures. So we've consolidated those in terms of location regulations. We also have deleted the 200 square foot maximum size that previously applied to sheds. So previously, if you had a shed that was over that size, it would have needed a variance, but that was very easily circumvented by then just calling it a workshop or some other use. So that has been eliminated. I do want to state, though, that that size limit or now the removal of that has nothing to do with when you might need a building permit. So those are still, of course, required whenever they are required, but no longer is there that 200 square foot maximum size for sheds. And then for the location regulations, as I said, we have consolidated those. So previously, this 8.5 foot maximum only applied to sheds, and now it applies to all sorts of freestanding accessory structures, whether it be a playset or a gazebo or something, or a detached garage or whatever. So it can be up to 8.5 feet in height to be located anywhere in your side or rear yard. And then what's new is we've added this intermediate step. So between 8.5 feet and 12 feet, it can be as close as 5 feet to your side and rear lot line. And then structures over 12 feet in height, they do need to meet the distance equal to the side setback for that district and a distance equal to their height from the rear lot line. And then something else that's new that I want to mention is these location regulations, they now do apply to interior single-family attached or townhouse type dwellings, where previously they did not. So two new freestanding accessory structure standards that we've added only apply to enclosed structures, so like the detached garage that you see in this illustration, or maybe a shed or a workshop, and they only apply on lots that are 36,000 square feet in size or less, and also only with single-family attached dwellings. So these new standards establish a maximum height of 20 feet, and we measure height for freestanding accessory structures from the lowest point on the adjacent finished grade to the highest point of the structure. So in the zoning ordinance, if you're poking around, you might find some illustrations that show how we measure heights for principal structures, which is sometimes to the midpoint on the roof line. But for a freestanding accessory structure, it's going to be to that from the highest to the lowest point. So we have this new standard of 20 feet. We also have a new cumulative maximum size of 50% of the principal structure. So this would mean if you have let's say you've got a shed and a detached garage, and maybe you've got a workshop as well, you would need to add the size up for all of those structures, and they can't exceed 50% of the size of the principal structure. And let's say, like on this illustration, it's a house. Now, I want to stress that these new standards are in addition to the requirement that applies across the board, regardless of the use, regardless of the lot size, and that is that accessory structures need to meet the definitions for accessory use and accessory structure in the definition section of the ordinance. So that includes that they do need to be subordinate in purpose, area, and extent. So let's say you are you're adding some detached accessory structure, maybe you want a pool house or something, and your lot is larger than 36,000 square feet. That pool house would still need to be subordinate in purpose, area, and extent, and need to meet those definitions. So these new standards, as I said, I just want to stress that they are in addition to applying the definitions that are also in the zoning ordinance. And both of these standards can be exceeded with special permit approval from the BZA. Decks and patios, they are allowed to extend into the minimum setbacks. Now, how much? It depends on the height of the deck and the type of the use. But previously, if there was any kind of modification, then it wasn't allowed to extend. So we have changed some of those regulations. Now, if they are basically at grade, and we've defined that as 8 inches or less, then even if they're attached, it can extend anywhere in your side or rear because it is at grade. Now, other regulations would still apply. So for instance, if you're going into your rear setback area, you still have rear setback coverage standards. But for location purposes, those at-grade structures can extend into the side and rear. Also, if you have lattice or what we're calling a privacy screen, it can be below a deck of any height. You can also have lattice that extends above a deck up to 8.5 feet in height, but it can only be from up to 2 sides from the dwelling. That would also be allowed. And then you can have other deck features like a pergola or a trellis or an overhanging planter. Now those pergolas and trellis type structures, they can also go up to 8.5 feet in height, and they can be 3 feet wide. Beyond the 3 feet wide, they would be considered a roofed deck, and those have different encroachment provisions that are also, we have a table, like I mentioned, we love our new tables. We have a table that summarizes all of the permitted extensions for decks, and the roof decks and the open decks are covered there. So I have a few other accessory structures that I want to mention. For carports, previously an open carport was allowed to extend into your side setback by up to 5 feet, but not closer than 5 feet to the side lot line. And that has actually been removed. So going forward, new carports, they will need to meet the side setback for the principal structure. And what that means then is down the road, if they want to convert that carport to a living room or a garage, it'll be placed where it can do that. Now, of course, if you already have an existing open carport that extends, of course, you know, it's fine. You get to keep that. For flags and flagpoles, the ordinance does have some new standards. Flagpoles on lots developed with single-family dwellings or manufactured home lots. The flagpole is limited to 25 feet in height, and then a flagpole on a lot with another use is limited to 60 feet in height. And we carried forward the standard that has a limit of 3 flags per lot, but no standards were added to the size of flags. And then if someone wanted to have a taller flagpole than the 25 feet or the 60 feet, they could request a special permit for that. And then for shipping containers, or what are sometimes called a sea cargo container, we did add a standard that codifies a longstanding interpretation that these are not allowed as accessory uses on residential lots, except as a temporary use for storage during construction with an active building permit. But otherwise, they are not permitted on residential lots.
All right, just a few other accessory structure changes that we do want to mention. First, we'll start with the basketball standards. So previously, basketball standards were all required to be 12 feet from the side lot line, regardless of the zoning district that it was located in. So we have now added a standard that would allow them to be either 12 feet or the side setback distance, whichever is less. So now they can take on the same setback as a principal dwelling would be able to take on, and that allows them to usually place the basketball standard where they would be wanting to place it, next to the driveway. Another standard we wanted to highlight is that we previously did not permit the recycling cans or trash cans to be located in a driveway. Recognizing that is indeed a common place to put your bins, we have now allowed for those to be located in a driveway. We've removed those prohibitions. We do still have some setback requirements if they are located in the front yard, and some screening requirements if they're within that setback, as well as they're not able to be located in a required parking space. In terms of through lots, these are lots that basically abut two public streets, but one of them isn't a major thoroughfare. So it doesn't have what we would consider a reverse frontage allowance, which gives you a little bit more flexibility. But we have allowed for structures to be located in the functional rear of the property, so basically opposite of where the front is. In order to have sheds or other accessory structures, there is now a special permit process rather than a variance application, which was what was previously required. So this does give a little bit more flexibility for use of the functional rears on these through lot type applications. In terms of inoperative vehicles, we have a couple of things we've carried forward and some new standards we've added to address some concerns that we've heard in the community about inoperative vehicles. So we have carried forward the requirement that they must be kept in a completely enclosed structure or completely screened from view. And the county code does define screen from view as not visible at the ground level from outside the property. So that fact hasn't changed, but we have added the requirement that any vehicles that are covered by a tarp, they're going to be considered outdoor storage now. And in residential areas, that is going to be limited to 100 square feet, and they can't be located in the front yard. So that is very limiting for any types of vehicles that would be covered by a tarp. In residential areas, we also have added a maximum of 2 vehicles that can be kept under a fitted car cover. So that's, again, to get away from trying to the junkiness that may occur from covered vehicles. So we do have a limit. And this cover does need to specifically be designed as a car cover, so not like a makeshift cover. So those are 2 different standards that we have added regarding inoperative vehicles. We have a couple of green accessory uses that we wanted to highlight. The first being electric vehicle charging, or EVC. It is allowed when it's accessory to a principal use, and since we are talking about residential changes here today, it is permitted accessory to residential development. We've gotten requests for townhouses and multifamily to have EV chargers installed, and we would limit them to level 1 or level 2 chargers. So that doesn't include the DC fast chargers like you see on the screen here that has the bulkier equipment and, kind of more of a visual impact. In terms of solar collection systems, this is our accessory solar use. So it's primarily going to be used for meeting on-site demands, and in residential areas, you're going to see a lot of roof-mounted solar panels that fall under this use designation. So we have added an allowance for roof-mounted panels to exceed the maximum building height by up to 5 feet. So that we think this is great because it does allow for retrofitting of existing buildings if they're already getting close up to that maximum building height. The panels can be placed on top without having to worry about bumping up into that height. In terms of your ground-mounted panels, not something we see as common with residential, but we do see if someone wants to do it in the backyard or if there's a solar canopy, we do apply the same freestanding accessory structure setbacks that Carmen mentioned earlier to the ground-mounted panels. Keeping of animals, this is my favorite slide, mainly because we have a lovely picture of Carmen's pup Kona on this slide, but we have made some changes to the permissions. So we do, in recognition of a state code change, we've aligned some of our standards to allow for up to 4 companion animals to be sheltered, fed, or watered for a fee. This really captures some of those sharing economy apps you'll see out there like Rover, Dog Vacay, and Fetch. So again, it is going to be limited to the 4 companion animals, and the person still needs to meet the overall dog unit or animal unit if it's another type of animal that's on the site. So let's say if you have a smaller property and you're limited to 2 dogs on the site and you already have one of your own, that means you only get to keep 1 companion animal under Rover. So one additional dog meeting those dog unit limitations. Commonly accepted pets was a definition that we previously had in our zoning ordinance, and that has been deleted. We actually are going to be deferring to the Department of Animal Sheltering, which makes a determination under the county code, chapter 41.1, of whether an animal is permitted in the county or if it falls under a wild or exotic animal. So we are letting the experts make those determinations now. We have clarified that the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, cannot allow a rooster with a special permit. Roosters are only permitted in conjunction with bona fide agriculture. So that's something that we want to make very abundantly clear with ZMOD. And then we have made a slight change to the dog units just based on a lot of the special permits that were being approved with at the BZA. Now up to 3 dogs are allowed on lots 10,000 square foot in size. And previously it did require 12,500 square feet to have up to 3 dogs.
So now we want to talk just about a few of the non-residential uses that are allowed in residential districts. So this is a new use that we're really hoping will get some great use. It's called alternative use of historic buildings, and it allows the board to approve a special exception for a non-residential use on a property that's listed on the Fairfax Inventory of Historic Sites. So this is intended to incentivize historic preservation through appropriate adaptive reuse. Of course, these properties are located throughout the county and in various zoning districts. Some of them are located in residential districts, so this would allow for certain non-residential uses that are go through that public hearing process and are considered appropriate for that location to be approved. Now, club, service organization, or community center. This is a consolidation of some previous uses that were previously special permit uses or special exception uses. And like I said, we have consolidated them into this one use. And going forward, these uses will require a special exception approval in certain residential and industrial districts. They'll require special exception in the C1 through C4. Those are the office commercial districts, and they'll be by right in the C5 through C8. Those are the retail commercial districts. And then a standard has been added that will allow the board to allow for non-member events at these establishments that are located in residential districts and impose conditions on those non-member events. So without this, it's not non-member events are not considered to be part of this type of use, but it can be approved by the board. And then I'll just note that the Community Swim, Tennis, and Recreation Club, this is still a separately defined use, and it still requires a special permit. And then everyone loves food trucks, at least I know I do. And we have expanded the ability to have them to non-residential uses in residential districts. So here we are talking about like a community pool, a religious assembly, maybe a private school. We're not talking about a home-based business. A home-based business is an accessory use to a residence. So here we're talking about a principal non-residential use that happens to be located in a residential zoning district. Now, these food trucks are still subject to all the other standards for food trucks, like a maximum of 4 hours, a maximum of 3 trucks, and then there's an additional limit of 12 times per year per location. And then let's say you have a community pool and they want to have more than 12, those community pools, as I just previously mentioned, they are approved by a special permit. So you could go back and amend your special permit, and the BZA could consider whether, let's say you had to have 20 times per year. The BZA could consider whether that should be allowed and impose any appropriate conditions. But you could have up to 12 through the administrative permit approval process.
So now we'll finish up with just a couple of other changes to residential uses and properties that we wanted to mention. The first is a new use that we've added, which is called the stacked townhouse dwelling. So this is a new dwelling unit type. It does have its own use name and its own definition, as well as its own set of standards too. So we're talking about dwellings that are arranged in vertical stacks of 2 units, like 2 over 2s. We have aligned the permissions with those of the multifamily dwellings, but we've given the setback allowances for the single family attached. We have increased the maximum height that's permitted because, again, we do want to allow for the stacking to occur. We've assigned an interim parking space of 2.3 spaces per unit, which is between the 2 uses. And I do mention that it is an interim rate because we do have a parking study that's getting kicked off that's going to result in some changes to the parking rates. So that study will also consider stacked townhouse dwellings along with all of the other uses to find the most appropriate parking rates. For for affordable dwelling units, we have aligned those with single family detached and attached for the contributions. This is getting into the nitty gritty a little bit, but we do want to talk about corner lots. So under the previous ordinance, so a building in the rear yard could take on the side yard setback on a corner lot. But going forward, we have made a change that the new construction is going to have to meet the full rear setback. And that's going to result for single family detached dwellings in the RE through R8 districts in a 25-foot setback from the rear lot line. And this is because, as you'll see in this diagram, this rough diagram here, a corner lot does result and require a larger lot width than an interior lot. So it can offset that additional setback because of that required additional lot width. I do want to mention that, this does only apply to new construction. So any additions to existing dwellings that predate the July 1st zoning ordinance date, they can continue to use that side setback for additions. So this is only new construction is going to have to meet that 25-foot setback. Another in the weeds concept that I'd like to discuss very briefly. So this deals with P districts without proffered yards. So previously, when you have an older P district that we're looking at and someone wanted to come in and, let's say, do an addition to it, we would apply the most similar conventional district, the setbacks of that most similar conventional district. As you'll see on the diagram on the left here, a lot of times that would result in a greater setback than even where the dwelling was already situated on the lot. So to allow for limited additions and bump outs, we have added a standard that would allow the addition to be located the existing distance to the lot line or the most similar conventional district setback, whichever is less. So you see on the right-hand side here, that gives them a little bit of room because we're looking at, okay, this is where the existing dwelling is. That's going to establish the rear setback now. So if someone wanted to come in and do a screened-in porch or a little addition here or bump out the front a little bit, they do have a little bit more flexibility to do that and to make those changes. This approach also does, we do apply that to the accessory structures as well. As Carmen mentioned, the freestanding accessory structures that are over 12 feet in height. We'd use the most similar conventional district or the distance established by the dwelling on the lot, whichever is less for the side yard for those accessory structures as well. And then last but not least, before we have time for questions, we do, in our previous ordinance, we had a setback from interstates and right-of-way from railroad tracks as well. And previously it talked about only those properties that were abutting the right-of-way. So if there was a little strip of land in between or, you know, something to not make it not abutting, they would not be required to meet this 200-foot setback. So we have removed that term abutting. So now this is going to apply to any new lots that are within 200 feet from the right-of-way from the interstates or the railroad tracks. Now I will note that modifications can be approved by the Board of Supervisors, as well as the zoning administrator can modify the setback. Basically, if it shows that the having to meet that setback would prevent development of the lot, we can take that under consideration. So with that, we have ample time for questions. So feel free to add questions to the chat or unmute yourself and ask a question.
So I do see a question put into the chat box, and it says, what is the maximum height for double stack townhouses? I think you're referring, if you're referring to stacked townhouses, that would be the maximum height would depend on the zoning district. And so we can look up some of those, but we did align the setbacks were aligned with the single family attached, but the heights, we looked at some of the applications that we had received for stacked townhouses and did allow a taller height in accordance with those, which makes sense since they are taller.
I believe it ranges between 50 and 60 feet in height off the top of my head. But if you check out the zoning district in question, we do have those charts that Carmen mentioned that list the maximum building height, and it will say single family attached and it'll say stacked townhouse dwelling as well. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. What are the side and rear setbacks for corner unit townhouses? This is in regard to adding a deck above 8 inches. So we do have that deck table that Carmen mentioned. So that's going to basically tell you the different encroachments and how much a deck can encroach into a setback based on how tall the deck is. We do have a distinction if any part of the deck is over 4 feet in height or not. So it would depend on the deck configuration and where it's being located, but we'd be happy to take a look if there's a specific scenario that you have in mind.
So I'll just say I tried out something that I'm always trying out different approaches on the ENCODE site. So I am on the zoning ordinance page, and on the far right, there's a tab at the top that says tables. And then one of the tables is permitted extensions for decks or patios. And then in that table, so I see your question relates to a townhouse. So I have to look at the middle part that says attached to single family attached dwelling. And then it gives me my different types depending on if it's an open or roofed. And it even says what the if you're looking at what's the side encroachment for an end unit. So
Carmen, could you share your screen really quickly to?
Maybe.
I can pull it up as well if you would like.
Do I go to
There's a little screen button on the bottom.
Oh, look at that. Okay, are you seeing it?
Nope.
Okay,
Yes.
was that a no or a yes?
Now it's a yes.
Okay, all right, so anyway, I went to this tables tab here, and then we've got this permitted extensions for decks and patios. This middle part talks about attached to a single family attached dwelling. And so then it depends on, do I want to know about maybe I only care about the rear setback. It says interior units can extend to the rear lot line, and end units not closer than 5 feet. So it just depends on all the details and which area you're looking at, but hopefully the table helps, and if not, we are happy to try to answer any questions. And how do I stop sharing?
There's a little like stop sign button. While you are stopping that, I'll go ahead and read out the next question. It says, please reiterate the new measurement requirements for height in the residential district, i.e., do you measure from ground plane, existing or proposed to what part of the roof? So to clarify, this is only for freestanding accessory structures, what Carmen was talking about the lowest part of the grade to the highest part of the structure. That's not a new change. That's something that was in our previous zoning ordinance as well. So there's no changes to measuring building heights, whether it be a principal dwelling, which is measured with averages versus the accessory structure, which is lowest grade to highest point of the structure. And then
Did
we
I
have,
did
oh,
I
go ahead.
stop sharing?
Yeah, yes, we can. Yeah, you're good. We can't see anything.
I am not good with GoToMeeting. I need to do some more of these and get used to it. All right, so let's see. Are we down to the question about, could you go over the 25-foot setback for corner lots?
Yes.
All right, so maybe Casey, do you want to bring that slide back up? So
Let's see.
previously, and it's only applied to in the RE through R8 zoning districts, the zoning ordinance allowed it still has it. You still had a rear setback. It was just allowed to take on the dimension of the side setback, and that allowance has been removed. So now for new structures on corner lots in the RE through R8 districts, they will need to meet that 25-foot setback. And then, as Casey said, this does not apply to, if you have an existing dwelling, not only is that fine, but if you want to put an addition onto that existing dwelling, you can continue to use the dimension of the side setback for your rear setback. And that's because the house maybe was placed in a certain way so that it would be really limiting at this point to apply that 25-foot setback. But going forward, you would need to meet the 25-foot rear setback. And there should be ample lot area because, as Casey said, a corner lot is required to have a wider dimension on both street sides. So it still should be fine.
And we have another question about corner lots. What are the location requirements for accessory structures on a corner lot? Thinking particularly where a house is not parallel to the streets. So your accessory structures, and I believe that if it's in conjunction with an existing house as of July 1st, they can continue to take on the side setback. Is that correct, Carmen, for accessory structures?
I think I would want to double check. I'm not
We'd
sure.
have to, yeah, we'll take a look at that, and we can circle back with you on that one. But they can't be in anywhere in either of the front setbacks, and then your rear setback is going to be, or your rear yard is going to be opposite the shortest front. So if you're over 12 feet in height, then you'd be applying, the distance in height from the rear, and then the side setback applicable from the side lot line.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you for the I was going to read the next question, but it was just that thank you guys for tuning in. I am feeling like this might not be the most exciting lunch you've had, but but we appreciate, everybody's interest, and we want you to know that we are definitely here for you. Casey and I are happy to answer questions about the new zoning ordinance anytime. And of course, we have our planner of the day that's also available. So I think we're all starting to get used to the new ordinance and the new online platform. We have a few more minutes though, if anyone has any other questions. We do have, and also we have one more lunch and learn. Did you mention that, Casey?
No, I did not. Next Wednesday, we have our final lunch and learn of this series on commercial and industrial changes. So feel free to tune into that. And this will be posted hopefully in the next couple of days as well, this video recording as well as the PowerPoint. So, all right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll let you enjoy a little last piece of your lunch. Thank you again, everybody, and hopefully we'll see some of you next week as well.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.